Hello, everyone, and welcome to this audio podcast. This audio podcast, as part of part of research and a presentation series. This audio podcast as part of a ZtormLabostix Productions, as part of a ZtormLabostix production. And this audio podcast will look at an overview in regard to an overview on adaptive perspective on some works from some peer-reviewed and published works from 2016, and the work we'll be sort of delving into delving into looks at discrimination and ignorance awareness for people with long-standing conditions and disabilities. This works was again peer reviewed and published in 2016, and the works was also where the works was also presented at an international pediatric conference, international pediatric conference in 2016 also. So the contents around this is where there'll be there'll be a little bit of an intro or introduction into this works, and then look at some aims and objectives, and then sort of a look at the sort of the defining aspects around discrimination in context and ignorance in context, looking at living with disability, and looking at assistive technology, and then looking at where this works, where the original works, and sort of adaptive aspects of the works. Also, we'll delve into a little bit of methodology in context of some data collection, and then as part of in line with the methodology, some aspects of the recruitment process that had taken place in context of PPI, or patient and public involvement aspects of this works, and then a look at analysis and themes, some analysis and themes that have been formed as part of this works, and then look at some discussion and conclusions. So to begin with, a little bit of intro, then some intro. So patients with long-standing conditions account for around around 50%, or around 50% of general practitioner appointments, 64% of outpatient appointments, and around 70% of hospital admissions, owing to the sort of incidences and etiologies, in regards to pathophysiology, or sort of devastations in some aspects. And so around 70% of total around 70% of total healthcare sort of expenditure, at least in the UK, where those suffering with long-standing conditions, and in some part, and also in some part, those suffering with disabilities, at least in the United Kingdom, is attributed to people to such such populations to such populations as informed from evidence and from from literature. So people diagnosed with long-standing conditions are perhaps also the most intensive users of healthcare services because of how how in amongst populations the pathophysiology and also the general general sort of strains can be more complex than those of people or those amongst the population with single illnesses or single diseases, for example. So most people are aged over 60, for example, have can have multi morbidities. Although an investigation had identified that the absolute number of people with multi-morbidity was higher. It was higher in those also in those amongst aged under 65, indicating its implications for the population for the population as a whole. And so this now goes in, and I'm now going into sort of some evidence is in regard to a perspective from the from a docu from the evidence from the UNCPD of the United Nations. So according to Article 1 of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of persons with disability, persons of disabilities, the UNCPD, persons with disabilities include, for example, those who have long-term physical, mental and intellectual or sensory impairments with interaction which in interaction with various barriers may hinder full and effective participation in society on an equal basis with others. And so between 2010 and 2030 to 2030, it has been postulated that the number of younger adults with learning disabilities aged between 18 and 64 will rise or increase by just over 32%, from around 220,000 to around 290,000, and the number of younger adults with physical or sensory impairments by sensory impairment by around 7.5%, 7.5%, from almost 200 and 2,900,000 2,900,000 to 3,100,000. And furthermore, rates of disabilities are increasing due to population aging and increases in long-term conditions among other causes. So the aims and objectives around this was where number one, to identify if the use of social media can help raise discrimination and ignorance awareness for people with long-standing conditions and providing a long-standing condition perspective, but also looking at assistive technology and sort of looking at assistive technology for people with disabilities, and secondly, to highlight perceptions through a social through a perspective of a social media platform, the RPSG social media platform. So a little bit a little bit in regard to discrimination in context. So discrimination is defined as distinguishing differences between treating someone as inferior based on race, gender, health background, health or healthcare background, national origin, age, or other characteristics. So according to the UNCPD, discrimination is defined as any distinction, exclusion, or restriction based on disability which has the purpose or effect of impairing or nullifying the recognition on an equal basis with others of all human rights and fundamental freedoms, according to the United Nations from their evidence in around 2006. Ignorance now, ignorance in context. So, relating to discrimination is ignorance, which is a state of being uninformed or having a lack of knowledge. And this means sharpening focus upon human rights, upon discrimination and ignorance as actually experienced by people with disability or long-standing conditions. One way of improving the awareness of discrimination and ignorance for disability or long-standing conditions for employers, for example, service users, service providers, policymakers, and healthcare professionals, is pointing them to information and resources where they can gain real experiences and understanding. And this can be achieved through information and communication technology, ICT, and through social media. So a little bit a little bit in regard to the evidence or in regard to living with a disability. So across the globe more often than non-disabled people with disabilities do not often receive the healthcare they require and have poorer health or can have poorer health. Persons with disabilities tend to report more access to healthcare problems than persons without disabilities. The problems tend to be most common amongst those with the poorest health, and those with the most severe disabilities. According to work sort of retrospectively, it is imperative that healthcare policymakers and planners and providers understand and address the needs of people with disabilities as a distinct category of healthcare consumers. People with disabilities are more than twice as likely to find healthcare providers, skills, and facilities inadequate, and nearly 3 times more likely to be denied healthcare, and 4 times more likely to be treated uh, treated 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 badly. The World Health Organization, the WHO Global Disability Action Plan from 2014 to 2021 sought to address disparities, and the right to receive the sort of highest attainable standard of health without discrimination on the basis of disability is also enshrined in Article 25 of the UNCPD. The right to health and work is also important in that it primes people with disabilities and long-standing conditions to lead to lead to lead to lead in and participate in in amongst in amongst their in amongst their counter. A little bit in regard to assisted tech. So there are a range of initiatives to highlight discrimination and ignorance through for example, information leaflets, online peer support, one-to-one counseling, for example, and group or cohort sort of educational initiatives. Initiatives can be characterized along a continuum with passive information provision about people's conditions, about people's conditions, or about populations conditions, and technical skills at the one end, or at the one hand, and then with technology that aids, or tech that aids to support behavior change at the other end of the continuum. Um, so one question that had propped up from a from a from a from a king's fund workshop in the United Kingdom some time ago now was how about assistive technology to preclude or raise discrimination and ignorance awareness. So a formal definition or basis of assistive technology, or AT, at least in the UK, at least in UK healthcare, had been derived from a 2001 King's Fund workshop, and a King's Fund workshop, which informed that any product or service designed to enable independence for disabled and older people. So now looking at looking at this works in regard to some some basic some basic sort of data collection aspects that went in that formed a collaboration between two social media platform organizations, the RPSG and KDOS, which and KDOS, where in the peer review published works, and the poster presentation was derived was that derived and that was derived this works now looks at the methodology aspects of this works, or part of this works. So a discrimination and ignorance thread was posted on the RPSG for 1 month in around between 2014 and between September and October 2014, inviting primarily those in amongst the RPSG, in amongst the social media platforms, to post comments and views to help answer the following questions. Number one, have you ever had any discrimination or faced and have you had any discrimination or faced any ignorance against you? Secondly, to what extent? Thirdly, is this something you have had with CKD or previously? Four, do you find there are inequalities and differences because of the condition or any other reasons? And fifthly, is it through work? Is it through work and or outside? So now looking into some aspects of the recruitment of this as part of this work. So all RPSGU members at the time were eligible to participate to post comments relating regarding to discrimination and ignorance, and the RPSGU has a disclaimer, still has a disclaimer, which relates to research and research consent, and requires that that there is that the that 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 those within the social media platform are aware that they are welcome to contribute to any data collection works through the social media platform. And if anyone felt uncomfortable contributing, they do not have to post any comments. Clear information about the investigation was made available, and there was privacy and confidentiality. Privacy and confidentiality was protected, and keeping comments anonymized. All members, all those using the social media platform were able to access and contribute to the thread. So now looking at some analysis and themes in the original works. There is in the original published works, there is a perspective of that there were a total of around 30 or just over 30 comments and between the themes, and there were two as part of this works, and within the published works, there were two main themes, and as part of this overview, only, just a few of the analyses or data will be informed here. So theme one, a lack of awareness, education, and understanding. So yes, there is a lot of ignorance out there. Even with the awareness, I face various ongoing obstacles, even with family members as well absolutely. And secondly, I wouldn't suggest discrimination because I feel it implies an intention of being mean. However, I'm sure my peer group simply don't understand what CKD means, despite my attempts at educating them. A second theme was in regard to disease sensitivity and patient experience. So I think it varies in its nature from country to country, and from organization to organization, as well as amongst individuals. My guess is that humans are essential tribal and have a natural tendency to favor their own, which I suspect is discrimination. Worse treatment by insurance companies for something for which you bear no fault or responsibility is certainly a form of discrimination, in my opinion, and means in my opinion, in my opinion, and so now going into some of the discussion. So a central importance to both national and international governments is trying to better understand how to effectively support patients with disabilities, with a disability and long-standing conditions, and this has been driven by shifts in policy, and policymakers should be making more headway to support people with long-standing conditions and disabilities to preclude discrimination and ignorance at all levels. And so now sort of overall conclusions. So all information communication technology, or ICT, and social media interfaces are potentially helpful and should be prompted to preclude discrimination and or ignorance. If policymakers are potentially discriminating at top-down level, then one of the questions one of the questions is then what chances do people have at bottom up? So there is thus a need for an attitude there is a need for an attitude change. That draws this audio podcast to a close. This audio podcast as part of research and presentation. This audio podcast as part of a ZtormLabostix production. Thank you.